Today, we're going to talk about
carburetors and how the many ways you can set one up incorrectly.
And it doesn't always bolt on and go right, but eventually it gets there. I'll show you.
I'm literally waiting for the oil to drain out of that.
So I'm going to walk you around this carburetor and show you the pieces and parts to it, and then I'm going to talk about the order of operations I use for tuning it.
Let's just kind of get started. Primary float bowl, primary metering block. This is the main body, secondary metering block, secondary float bowl, throttle linkage, fast idle screw, idle mixture screws. There's 4 of them on this one, 2 in the front and 2 in the back.
With me so far?
All right, this is the choke and the choke horn. That's the electric choke. If this was manually, it'd be there. Some of them don't even have it. You got boosters, you have air bleeds. If there was a squirter, like there is on the primary where that screw is, it would be right there on a double pumper. On the bottom side, accelerator pump. If this was a double pumper, there'd be another one down there. But since this is a vacuum secondary, it doesn't have that. Primary doors, secondary doors,
Otherwise known as butterflies. Not too bad, right? Now let's talk about what's on the inside.
So on the inside, the fuel comes in through there. This is your float. And basically, as the fuel level rises, it goes up, closes the needle and seat. As the fuel gets used, it goes down, opens the needle and seat, and with the positive pressure from the fuel pump, fills it back up, closes, and that cycle happens over and over. That's the accelerator pump like we were talking about. That's the little hole that squirts in there and makes it go into that hole and that one. Then it comes up, goes in there, and then it shoots out of the squirter.
And that's how you get that pump shot.
To adjust like the needle and seat, you use a flathead screwdriver. That just locks it in. The actual adjustment's done with that 5/8 bolt right there. And it actually turns the needle and seat to make it go up and down depending on what you set it to. Those are going on the other carburetor on the truck in a little bit.
Pretty excited about those. I didn't know these existed.
ADHD moment.
They literally make float bowls with quick change things for your jets. So those 2 brass plugs there, you can take them out and take the jets in and out without taking all the carburetor apart. I knew they existed for a Dominator. I didn't know they existed for a 4150, and I'm very excited to have them.
We'll put that on the truck
Later on. But okay, back to this thing.
So on the actual metering block, you have your main jets and you have your power valve. The main jets are used for like when you're cruising down the road, how much fuel comes in and gets pulled down through the boosters.
So that sets your AFR and all that kind of fun stuff.
The power valve, what does that do?
Let's say you're going up a hill. You've got your throttle, you're pressing down on it. You get halfway up the hill, and then about partway up the hill, the motor will drop its vacuum,
open the power valve, causing more fuel, just a little extra splash of fuel to go with what's already coming into your main jets into your well here. And this is the well that feeds the boosters where the fuel goes down into the carb. And this will keep you from having to move your foot when you're going up a hill.
And when you get to the top of the hill, the vacuum rises because the motor's not doing as much work, and the
Power valve closes
and everything's hunky-dory. So very smooth. That's kind of one of the transition circuits, if you will.
Same with like the accelerator pump. They're considered transition circuits.
And I don't want to get into circuits because they can get pretty complex pretty quick. But yeah.
And then on the back side and the secondary side, it has the exact same setup. It just doesn't have this guy that goes to the vacuum advance. But that
is a 4150. Now let's talk about order of operations for setting one of these up for when you need to set it up. Out of the box,
usually you can literally bolt them right on. They'll fire up.
They'll usually be rich. You'll need to adjust your idle screws down a little bit to like fine tune it. But beyond that, out of the box, they're really good. Sometimes you have to go down a couple jet sizes. Very rarely do you have to go up in jet sizes with a brand new carb. Now, if you pick one up off of eBay or your buddy gives you one, like many of the ones I have, usually you kind of got to start from scratch, figure out what it needs, put new seals and stuff in it, put it back together.
Give me just a second, I'll put this back together, and then we'll talk about
making one run. Let's talk about what it takes to get one of these to run if you stumble across one sitting in a field, or you got one that you picked up and you want to play with. If you've got it on the vehicle and you've got your fuel lines hooked up, usually this is like just to get it running. I would turn this screw to the right, make sure it has enough fuel to stay running, and then once it fires off, it stays running. The reason you want it running and you just want to get it running is you have to tune a carburetor with the motor hot. It's got to be warm, it's got to be up to operating temperature, or it will not work right. If you tune one with it cold, it will be wild when it gets hot, and you'll be frustrated. Been there, done that, learned. First thing I try to do, once it's running, I try to set the float levels. It's important to have that right, because if you have it too high, it'll diesel when you turn it off. If you have it too low, you'll have lean spots because it'll run out of fuel when it sucks it up through the boosters. Important to get that right. There's two kinds of styles. There's like the glass, where you come up there and you would see how much fluid's in it based on the sight glass, or you'll have the old school style, which have a peephole. Like this one. Now you have to be careful with this, because this is raw gas and that is literally pumping fuel into it if that floats down. So be careful. Hot manifolds, fire, caution, be real, careful. I tend to like these better, because this one, you kind of fill it up. You want your float level about at the bottom third of the sight glass. This one, you want the float level just below the weep hole. And that sets the float level. And once you have the float level set, it's time to move on to the idle. And this one has 4-corner idle. And all these things have procedures and stuff like that on the Holley website. And there's lots of great videos out there of other people that explain in depth how to do each one of these steps. But just FYI. With the 4-corner idle, you're gonna want a vacuum gauge, and you want to hook this up to the full manifold vacuum. Now, what does that mean? What the manifold vacuum? So, like, this is a ported vacuum that goes to the vacuum advance. This one down next to there, if I can get that little cover off. Like, this is manifold vacuum. That's the vacuum in the manifold. You want to hook this up to the manifold vacuum. And the goal with your idle screws is to go around evenly around on all 4 corners and try to get at idle the most vacuum you can. The more signal you give a carburetor, the better it responds. Who knew, right? More vacuum, more better. Usually, like a good starting place, I think, and there is literally a procedure for this. I tend to go like, turn them all the way in on all the corners, and then I turn them all the way out 1.5 turns. Then I see what my FR is, I see what my vacuum is, and then I proceed to slowly turn them in. You know, I'll start over there, turn this one in a quarter a turn, turn this one in a quarter a turn, turn that one in a quarter a turn, corner turn, evaluate it on the vacuum gauge, and then make it until it has that full highest vacuum that it's going to be. And you got to give it a second. Like, it's you turn it, let it sit for a moment, turn it, let it sit for a moment, turn it, let it sit for a moment, and then it'll level out as the fuel changes as the motor's using it up. Pretty cool, right? So now we've got our vacuum idle set. It's idling good. This is kind of the basics, and I don't tend to proceed to primaries and power valves, secondary jets and secondary power valves until after it idles good and the mixture's good. It's kind of like incremental and it's cumulative. So carburetors are very cumulative. So what you do at the bottom affects the top, and what you do at the top can affect the bottom, because it all works together. Next, now I've got all my idle circuits working. I want to try and drive the thing. This is kind of where we get to the accelerator pump. A lot of times, if they've been sitting for a while, things like that, most of the time out of the box they're ready to go, because as soon as you hit the gas, it squirts, fuel gets down through the booster, through the squirter, and it works. If it doesn't work, most of the time, like this one's loose right now, and there's a gap. Let me spin this. This one would need adjusted before driving, because see this gap? That would cause problems. So I would properly adjust that. There are procedures and stuff like that on the Holley website and other people. Because if you go to drive it right now, it would have what's called a lean stumble, because you would go open this, air would go in,
there wouldn't be enough fuel to burn properly. It'd go pop, might stall, might bang,
Might run rough as crap, and your off idle acceleration will be garbage. It sucks. It's no fun.
Once you have that set properly, it's time to move into those primary jets.
This one, you really need an AFR gauge, and you have to pay attention to how the vehicle drives. Off idle, it's going to transition using that accelerator pump. Then it's going to be driving, and whatever your fuel ratio is, you might need more, you might need less. But this is one of those, you have to get out and drive it. Be gentle with it. Don't floor it. You know, come off of idle, step into it, see what it looks like on the AFR gauge, and then go from there. And if you don't have an AFR gauge, you have to be incredibly cautious, because you can pull the spark plugs out and read the spark plug, whether it's lean or rich, and there's little charts that'll tell you what that means. But you'd literally have to go drive it, give it some gas, turn it off immediately, get off on the side of the road, pull the spark plug out, look at it, and do that. And that's kind of a pain. AFR gauge, much easier. You just drive it down the road, look at the gauge. Oh, it's 11-to-1, it's rich. I need to go to a smaller jet side. Or, hey, I'm driving it down the road, I'm coming off of idle, and then immediately it's at 15. It needs more fuel. Let me put a couple more jets into it. Little things you learn with an AFR gauge. AFR gauge is probably one of the best tuning tools you can have for a carburetor. So, we've talked about that. And don't be afraid to get it wrong. Just, if it's not right, don't go super far away. Don't go super fast. Take your time. Come back to the house. Take it apart. Try again. It's not that bad. Don't worry. It's a carburetor. But once you get it right, you'll know. After the main jets and you get those figured out, it's time to talk about power valves. Power valves can really make the difference, especially if you live like where I do in Tennessee. It's not flat. You got a lot of hills. You're going to take a vacuum reading with the thing in gear if it's an automatic, or if it's a manual, you just take a vacuum reading. Whatever your highest vacuum is at idle, you would cut it in half. So let's say you're idling with 15. All right, power valve, probably going to need a 7.5 power valve in the front. And what that'll do is, like, let's say you start going up a hill and you're driving it. Your main jets are driving it. It's just fine on level flat. The second you start going up a hill, you put more load into the engine. It needs more fuel to mix with the air. So that power valve will automatically open and close that, and you'll never have to move your foot, and it'll go up the hill nice and smooth, and you won't even know it's there. All right, power valve, main jets, idle, crisp, golden, everything's working just fine. Now that I have the primary side, I've basically been using the carburetor as a 2-barrel carburetor at this point. When it's time to transition to work on the secondaries. With the vacuum secondaries, they have different springs, they have different colors on them. There's a chart that's actually really good. It's buried in that bag. Let me get that out. This is on the Holley website too. This is the chart that they use for like recommending what secondary spring you need. They have a small block here, they have a big block over here. Generally, the white, orange, yellow, purple, plain, brown, black, that's going up in stiffness. The black one's the stiffest, the white one's the lightest. So the white one will open the fastest, the black one will open the slowest. Their chart's pretty good. Usually I tend to start with the yellow and then see what happens, because why not? And then what'll happen is the vacuum secondaries will open and it'll start to draw fuel through the secondary boosters. And everything's hunky-dory. Some of them do not have power valves in the back, and usually if it doesn't have a power valve, it's jetted up 10 sizes, 8 to 10 sizes, depending on your altitude. And also, by the way, race applications like drag racing, circle track, they don't run a secondary power valve. They literally just put a plug in it, they jet up 8 to 10 sizes and leave it alone. And that 8 to 10 sizes is 8 to 10 sizes bigger than their primary. Lots of information in this. Once the secondaries open and you have them opening at the right rate, you can evaluate like if your jets are too big or too small in your rear. But you have to make sure that the vacuum secondaries are opening before you can assess that. Usually this will involve the vehicle being into the meat of the power band. So you have to be extremely careful, take your time. Don't just thwomp on it and mess things up, because this is when the motor is going to be doing some pulling. It's going to be doing some work. And if you run it lean real hard and run it down the road, you can blow a hole through a piston pretty quickly. A motor will self-cool itself, called ablative cooling. They do it with rocket engines, where it literally eats itself to cool itself down. Pistons will do that in your motor. So that's the little springs. Now on a double pumper, like on the C10 that's out there, I don't have it in here right now, it has another accelerator pump, and when it transitions to the secondaries, it squirts more fuel down in. Fuel goes through the booster, or the signal goes through the booster, and then it draws up out of the well, and you do kind of the same thing. But because there's that accelerator pump, it covers up that transition from the primary to secondary. With this one, with the vacuum secondary, I'm going to shift gears here and talk about vacuum secondary. Usually it's with an automatic, and why they're so street friendly is it will open and close this vacuum secondary on demand. So if the motor needs more air and fuel, it'll automatically open this on and up. On a double pumper, like out there now, if you open the throttle past 30 degrees or whatever it is, it doesn't matter. It will be opening those blades. It will be sending signal through the secondary boosters, and it will be drawing fuel. It will not do it automatically, but it'll just pull it through with there. You can run into like kind of a weird transition if you don't have enough pump shot, you don't have enough accelerator pump. Like there's some tuning things that you have to do there. But basically it's the same principle as tuning on the primary. It's just on the secondary, because it's two barrels just bolted together. So that is a rough lot of information. I hope it helps. Hope it's not too confusing. Carburetors take some time. Don't be afraid to get them wrong. Like, I don't know if you noticed, but I've got a stack of stuff of carburetor things, and I don't get it right all the time, but eventually I do. I just have to work on one area of the carb at time. And by working on it one area at a time, I can see how my effects change it. And was it good? Was it bad? Evaluate it and then move on. And once you get, like, let's say you walk through this process, you get it running, you get it warm, you set your float level, you set your four corner idle, it's running real good. You can idle it back down a little bit to set the idle speed. You get your primaries all set up, you get your secondary set up. The carb works really well, but working incrementally, you're isolating each one of these circuits in the carburetor and its behavior. And then eventually you have a 4-barrel carburetor that is tuned to work with your motor. Every carburetor is tuned to work with that individual motor. So my settings will not work on your engine, I promise. In fact, like learning the settings to that thing has kind of kicked my butt. That's why this video is kind of really long. But I hope all this information helps. I hope it's not too confusing, and thank you. All right, now I'm going to show you putting the double pumper on the truck and the experience and what I had to do to make that one work. So thank you guys. Let me take you back in time. I installed a big block 540 from Blueprint Engines with my buddy Troy into my 1969 long bed step side. When I set up the motor, I installed it with an 870 CFM vacuum secondary 4150 Holley carburetor. Worked great. Was able to get it jetted, make it run right, figure out the correct power valve for the primary side. It had an electric choke. Things are all great. Working my way through the tuning process, because I do want to get this thing tuned, and eventually we've got this guy right here, and I'm ready to install that. But to be able to install that, I have to have a fairly decent tune in it. That will not cover up a totally bad tune, but it will help a good tune. And that's what I want to use it for. So without any telemetry, I've been working with an AFR gauge, which is basically the only data point besides a vacuum gauge, to set up the tune in the big block 540. I'm going to tell you, I didn't get it right the first time, the second time, the third time, the fourth time, the fifth time, or the 13th or 14th or 15th time. I figured that's what was about to happen.
I've had the carburetor
on and off the truck. And if you notice, that ain't the carburetor that I just had on the workbench. And it's not even the carburetor I had intermediately on the truck.
I actually picked up the chromate version of this carburetor
because, you know, it matched the aesthetic of the old school motor. Started with what I already knew.
With the primary side,
Copied the jets over, same power valve, set the 4-corner idle, and was off to the races.
When I was trying to tune the secondary side, things got very, very interesting. No matter what spring combination, or jet combination, or power valve combination I put in this thing,
I could not get it to work.
it would not transition from the primary to the secondary without having a major lean spot right in the middle of the power band.
And that scared me. It scared me a lot.
I only got this to transition once,
And I mean, that's from literally idle to wide open throttle, which is a big pull. But no part throttle good response. It would still have a lean spot in it. It would pop, it would sputter. I'd see an AFR of 16, 17, and then it would start to pull. Like that scared me.
What I found out, after even trying everything up to the black spring to slow down the butterflies on the secondary, this was not the right carburetor for the application.
We're officially on to plan B.
We've got the double pumper all prepped out. We have 78 jets in the front, 4.5 power valve. We have a 42 squirter. We have an 87 jet in the back with a 3.5 power valve and a 31 squirter. We added our electric choke. We got our positive crankcase ventilation in the back, and everything is hooked up. And now I just need to get it on the truck and put fuel in it, set the float levels, and see what happens. I'm hoping this is the magic combination. We've taken carburetors on and off this truck enough. I feel like we might finally be there. So, to work. I'd be lying if I said I wasn't a little bit nervous. Old school double pumper 850. Got our fuel regulator on it, our electric choke. We got the jets that we want to try in it. I'm going to start with an 87 because I can't decide if it needs to be an 86 or an 88. So I split the difference. I have the same jets that I had in the other carburetor because they worked really good. 78 with the same power valve, 4.5. Put a 42 squirter back on it. It does have a 30cc accelerator pump in the front, but this also has a 50cc accelerator pump in the back with a 31 jet. So that's a lot of fuel in that secondary.
I don't think we're gonna run out of fuel in the transition this time.
All right, double pumper.
Let's see if your legend holds.
Let's get it on the truck
and then see what happens.
We do have to set the float levels when we get it on the truck and make sure that these aren't leaking.
But other than that, we should be able to go and drive it too. Okay, I'm gonna get to work. First crank, brand new carb. Let's see what it does.
Here's your first look at the double pumper. All stacked, plumbed, and ready to go. Got the choke hooked up.
As far as I can tell, everything's tight. We'll check it for leaks here in a minute after we crank it. So, that's exciting. Nothing to it but to do it. Got the keys. I've never had a double pumper on this truck, so I'm kind of excited to see if it lives up to the legend of the secondaries. I mean, could be fun.
All right, this will probably not work, but we'll try it. Give us some instrumentation. No need to pump it because I dumped it down the throat. A little bit longer. We'll go check our fuel pressure and stuff here in a second. But
alright, let's go do a leak check. That should be enough to have pressure up there.
I see a little bit of fuel on top of here. I'm looking for leaks. We haven't built any pressure, and this should have built pressure with it running. So it's either pushing it all into the carb, and that's why it's flooded. I'm gonna crack these open, because this is how you check the float levels on the old school ones. Let's see if it's too tall without losing this.
Okay, there is fuel in there. I don't know if you can tell with the light, but I might have to raise that up. I hear it pumping fluid. So, we got a float stuck. Many hours later, I have robbed the metering block and the float bowl off the vacuum secondary, put it all back together, hooked everything back up. We'll give it a go later on. It's getting dark. I need to go cook some supper, so we will get at it later. Our sunk float bowl, another metering block we'll leave up here on the bench. And moment of truth, float level in the front is about 1/3 at the bottom. I'm good with that. I need to check that back float level. Now, because this one has the old school where it's literally the ports, I gotta take that brass screw out without losing the gasket or breaking it. So I'll get you set up and I'll show you what that looks like here in just a moment. So hopefully, I don't like doing this with it running because it is literally putting fuel into that float level. And there's some coming out. We might have to lower the back one just a little bit. I want to see how much comes out. This is still technically under pressure. Yeah, I gotta lower that just a little bit. See, I got 6 PSI here. I'm gonna lower that just a tear. Now to raise it, you spin it to the left, and to lower it, you bring it to the clockwise on the inside. I need a 5/8, which I might have laying up here. No. Yeah. So to lower, yep, there's fuel in there. I'm gonna go there. Now that should have brought the float level, in theory, the level of fuel down just a hair. Instead of it being at the sight plug, I want it just at the bottom of it. So, all right, that should be, I just want to verify it's tight before I turn it on, because fire is bad. All right, bring it back over and check it again. And according to our AFR gauge, it's actually a little bit on the rich side for its idle, so we can come down a little bit more in our idle screws. We'll do it at the front. Let's see, where are you? Just a little bit's coming out. We're gonna leave it there. We'll see if it diesels real bad. I don't want it to dump fuel everywhere right now. We can also adjust that when it's cool too. Because remember, I'm trying to get like, this one could actually come down a smidge. Just the same as, let's do that. While we are here, let's make things safer and all better. Come down just a bit. I'm gonna go here. I'm trying to fight with all my cables. Okay. Dry up. Let's give it a minute to dry out in here. We'll check it. Crank it back over. Something else I want to mention. I have forgotten to hook up this electric choke in Vacuum Advance, so anytime you're taking the car monitor off, remember to put those on or it will run like absolute crap. And you'll break down, like this clip right here. With the power of a screwdriver, it seems pretty happy. We're gonna go and get it really warm and drive it around the block and then adjust the idle again. but it's in the ballpark, but I want it to be a little bit better and our AFR vacuum to be a little bit happier. So that's what I'm gonna work on now, is to actually drive it around, come back, adjust it again. Update, the double pumper is working. I need to adjust the 4-corner idle where it's better all the way around. I have an idea of what I need to do there, and I need to add a number 42 squirter so it gets more squirter when it's getting into the secondaries. If I roll into it, it had plenty of power. If I stomped on it, it ran out of gas in the transition. And let's see. We see the light at the end of the tunnel, but we're gonna keep working at it. I need some tacos, and then we'll come back and do that. This can cool off. Something else I'm also using is a hollow screw, because this is a 42, and with a 50cc accelerator pump, you need to use these hollow screws, especially when you get greater, I think, than 38. And this had a regular screw in it, so that might have been part of our problem, but I think this will overcompensate for what our problem is. So let's get this in. Now, how do I do it without dropping all the things? Okay, all right, very carefully. Now, if this was the primary side, I'd pull the carb. I wouldn't do this on the motor. All right, 42 installed. So there's a 42 in the front and a 42 squirter in the rear. So that should be a lot of fuel up there. Next, I need to go to 1 1/4 on each of these and see how they do. Yeah, I don't think they're evenly square, and that's part of the reason I think it was idle and rough. And why our AFR was so freaking rich when we were driving around, is I monkeyed with this, and I think I went the wrong way on one of them. But I don't remember which one it was, so like with all things, turn it off, turn it back on, start over. Half, 1 1/4. All right, let's see what our AFR is when it fires up now. It should be a little bit better. We're a little bit better, but I bet when I put it in gear, it'll be 13.5, 14. But this will be good to drive it around. Let's go for a drive and see what it does. All right, let's get to 3rd gear. It needs a 50cc up front. I can already tell. It'll accelerate harder, and it'll be more even. That last drive, even more success. Now, we need to change this accelerator pump from a 30cc to a 50cc. There's a few things we got to do for that. It's not just a bigger housing, it's a bigger spring, a bigger gasket, a much beefier arm. Like if you look at that, like look at that little 30cc versus look at the meat.
And we need a big brown cam, like that one. So let's get that torn down, put a 50cc on the front,
and then go for another test drive. Progress. What do I need to do to put a 50cc squirter on this now?
I need to get the air hat off. I need to take off the throttle return spring, drain the front fuel bowl, take off the fuel line, bring the fuel bowl over to the workbench, swap it out.
I'll get started with that and I'll show you what happened. .50 accelerator pump done. There's nothing in the, but there is some in the rear, and I can put some down in there. That should be enough to crank it over. I know it's empty now in the bowl, so it'll take a second to fill it up. Hopefully it doesn't die, but we'll find out. Fire in the hole.
It will probably run and die, which would be expected. Power contact. Bet it ran out of fuel, but that's okay. Fuel pump turned. Squirt the secondaries. All right, third time's the charm. Some more out of the secondary.
Leak check. I think that was squealing a belt. We might have to tighten up a belt. That's new.
All right, I'm looking for around this accelerator pump, any of this, the junctions I touched, we appear dry. And if I look down in there, see if you can see it, this should, let's see, gotta press on it. I don't know if y'all can see this. Yep, those are working. And those are working.
Double 50s. This is new. All right, so I guess turn it back on, let it run, take it for a ride around the block. Set of twists. Work on our brake bias. I am so thrilled I don't have to take the carburetor back off after this. That carburetor has been on and off so many times. This is a major milestone for me. I'm gonna enjoy it, put some miles on it, And I would ask that you consider subscribing if you've made it this far into the video. It helps us out, it tells YouTube you want to see more, and if you hit that like button, it helps promote the video and it helps us grow, and it shows the support that keeps me motivated and keeps this going. I'm so happy about that drive. I'm probably going to go for another drive here in a little bit because it's working so well. One thing of concern that has come out of that entire drive, it wasn't the fuel, it wasn't the carburetor, it was this right here. That says the temperature of the transmission is 212 degrees. Might be putting it, no, we will be putting a trans cooler on now. But anyway, I'll let it cool off because I mean, like, 60 degrees outside, blasting down the 2 lanes, blasting down the interstate, blasting down any highway I could find to kind of open this thing up. She did real good. All right, I'm gonna go. We'll do more later. It's not puking coolant, it's not overheating, and it's not running out of gas in the rev range. I'm gonna call this a success. I mean, just out, running in the sun. It's a nice 68-degree day, so it's not cool, it's not hot. But the truck, it seems to be finally running really good. So we'll go do some more acceleration runs on it and verify our results. But I think the 250cc pumps, 242 squirters, 78 in the front, 4.5 power valve in the back, 3.5 power valve, and 87s. And it ain't running out of fuel. And ooh, beastie. All right. Well, I'm Gorm. I will see you guys in the next one. You guys have made it a really long time for this one because, whew, I've been messing with these carbs for a while. And I think finally we cracked the code. And if that's what we got to do to crack it, we'll take our time, figure it out, and work our way through the problem. Sweet. I'm Gorm with Gormworks. I'm out. Thank you for watching.